Got it? Okay, so we're here, and this is Cooking with Jimmy. So this is our first show, and we're going to tell you how to cook up some good eats. So first we have here is we have a acorn squash, also known as a pepper squash. Very easy to find. They have them everywhere, and we've already taken the seeds out and gotten rid of them. So what you're going to do next is you're going to take a fork and you're going to pierce it. And what this does is this is going to let the flavors penetrate inside as it cooks and get into the meat of the flesh of the squash. All right. Well, it doesn't take much time. Okay, that's all done. Now I'm going to get some fresh garlic, which I keep in the freezer, but it's kind of like flash frozen, so it's got to be, it's the same thing as fresh, and on another program we will show you how to make that. So each one, give or take, represents a clove. So it's basically 1 clove of garlic. You can never have too much garlic in squash. It takes such a while to cook that the flavor weakens of the garlic because of that. So you're going to put it in there. That's going to give a little defrost while it sits there for a second. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take a spoon and we're just going to press it in like this. We'll press it into the squash. It'll get in all those little holes, which is going to penetrate and give us a nice taste. A little stiff and frozen yet, but it thaws out almost instantaneously, very, very quickly. Okay, so we have our garlic in there. Next step is we're going to take some organic coconut oil, and we're going to put a dollop in there. We'll put another dollop in there. It would be about a teaspoon, maybe a tad more. We're going to spread it around the inside of the squash. Okay, we had a little bit more in the other one, so we're just going to even the score. Put that in there. Okay, next step is, almost forgot, we need some seasoning salt. So, seasoning salt, doesn't matter the brand, everybody has their favorite, and you put a decent amount because there's a lot of flesh on the squash. It's pretty thick, so you can give it a relatively decent amount of salt. Yeah, Lori, seasoning salt, and then you're going to put a decent quantity of cracked black pepper. And you want quite a bit because it sits on the surface, and I've noticed people eat it two ways. Either they dive into it and they mix it up and stir it all up together before they eat it, or me, I'm more of the guy where I like to pick at it and have that top flavor. It's like getting the outside of the roast beef where you have that crust and you get that burst of flavor, and then you have your squash taste as well. So now we have that done. We got 2 bowls here. We're going to take a bit of parchment paper so we don't make a mess of the microwave. Do not put saran wrap or plastic over it. Lots of toxins and stuff in that. And this is the best way to do it. Just wrap it up. Doesn't have to be anything fancy because it's only keeping the splash out of there. Now you can bake this as well if you're against microwaves, but it's more of a time restriction here. Okay, so we have our 2 squashes. We'll take it and we'll throw it in the microwave. And we're going to start it off at 10 minutes, which should be just fine for the size of these squashes. $9.30, close enough, 9.5. Okay, so now we'll just give a quick clean off on this cutting board because we have peppers in it. We don't want it. Okay. So now I'm going to show you how to deal with a mango. And this is how you cut a mango. So you're going to go up to the seed, go across the seed, do the same thing on the other side. And you can deal with that other part later. But now you're going to go and you're going to score it like this. Oh, my knife's a little sharp. I've gone through the side, but be gentle. Once it's done like that, the whole thing's going to flatten out very easily. So then you're just going to push it down. And you're going to cut right through it. There you go. Quite easily done. No messing around, no peeling, no fighting with the seed. Done. That's got that part. Okay. Okay. Do the other side. You could also go like this. You want to go this way, go on the inside, the tip of the knife. Option number 2. As you get down to the base of it, same thing. Once you have those scoring in it, the thing will flatten out, like so. You flatten this out, and you just go through and cut it all off. Probably about the easiest way to get a mango. Skin off and get the meat. So then what we're going to do is we're going to mince it up. And once we get it minced up and we get set up, we'll be right back. Okay?
There you go.
Okay, so now we've got it all nice and minced up. You want it nice and fine and minced. You don't want chunks in there because it just turns out that much better. It makes it very, very tender. And it's a smooth texture. Okay, now the most important thing is the cooking wine. So we got to get ourselves nice fine cooking wine out of here. Just like this is going to suffice. We'll get this ready to go. Every good meal should have good cooking wine. All right. Okay, so now I'll start off with this. You didn't think I was going to put it in there, did you? You got to put it in here. This is cooking wine. Okay, now we got the cooking wine ready. Cheers. Next step is we have the squash in the microwave. I was at 9.5 minutes. I went and poked pork into it. It was a little firm still, so I added a couple minutes to it. You can't really cook it too much. It's called squash for a reason. You got to squash it and get it nice and tender. Okay, next we are going to use seasoning spice for our salmon. Actually, let's start with getting a little more coconut oil in the pan. Now you're going to use coconut oil. You don't want to use olive oil. Olive oil is not to be heated. Olive oil turns into like 10W30 and is a carcinogenic once heated. So it's good for salads and other things, but never ever cook with it. So we got our olive oil in the pan. We're going to get this nice and hot. When you're cooking fish on a barbecue, all that, in my opinion, always turns out best in the pan because it sears the skin. It doesn't dry it out because it has no hot air going to it. And if you get the temperature right, so you want this really, really, really hot. And what we're using today is, this is a brand, it's very close to almost, I'd say the closest thing that I could say spice-wise that it's to, or seasoning, is it's basically like a ground up chicken bouillon, like almost like chicken base. So this gives it its saltiness, and it gives it its flavor. It's like a flavor enhancer. This stuff has MSG in it. MSG is not really bad for you unless you have an allergic reaction to it. Then you gotta stay away from it. So we put a fair amount of that on. Then this is another seasoning I like to use all the time. You want to put a lot of this on. This is a blackening fish spice. So what it does is it has certain ingredients in the spices that once it gets hot in a pan and hot oil, it will blacken up, and it creates a crust. It's flourless, but it creates a crust that will they'll make it nice and give it a crispy texture on the outside. Now you want this pan really, really hot before you put the fish in. If you're not sure if it's hot enough, you don't want to set the kitchen on fire, but you can always test it with the fish. And when it touches the pan, see, it doesn't have that much sizzle, so it's not ready to go yet. Back to the cooking wine. Okay, our seasonings are done with. This pan looks hot. You can usually tell when the oil is really hot. It will get really watery, very thin. It'll almost start to make movements if you look in the reflection of the light in the pan. It's best to have a splatter screen, because otherwise you're really going to mess up your stove in your kitchen, and you need the high heat. So you just start to see the smoke coming off of the pan. As soon as you see the smoke coming off the pan, that's a good sign that we're really hot. See how that just did the sizzle as soon as it went in. So we're going to put this in the pan. We're going to put our splatter screen on top. That just keeps everything from shooting all over the place. While that's doing its thing, I'm just going to check on the squash. And the squash is great. Now the thing about squash is it really holds the heat for a long, long time. So we can leave that sit there in the microwave, don't pull it out, and by the time we serve the fish and have it all ready, it's going to be at an edible temperature. Nobody's going to hurt themselves. So the key about cooking salmon is timing. It has to be done just right. We use salmon steaks. I've tried this recipe with using a salmon fillet. It does not work. And I'm not a huge fan of fish bones and all that and the skin, but there's something to do with the outer shell layer of the skin that's around it and the bone that goes through the center of the fish that adds a huge moisture and flavor effect to this recipe. We will make another episode that has the best way to cook a fillet of salmon. So we're going to check out the other side. It's still got you can see it's still got a bit to go because it's not really blackened yet, but that's the starting point. And we're going to flip it back and forth till we get a nice deep golden brown texture. Then the finishing off will be to spread one of them apart and check the center to make sure it's perfectly cooked inside. Alright? And then we'll be back. Okay, so we're back again. We think that we're pretty well about the part. You can see that got a lot of smoke going on here. See, we get a nice blackened color to it. That sears it in. Now, I've noticed that the smaller one has more blackening on it. So what's going to happen is we have a flame under here. And it doesn't matter. We could just pull this pan to the side, this cast iron pan. So we can move this to the side because we want this to get less temperature than the big guy here. So that's something to think about. Now this is not like a hamburger cooking on a grill where you should only flip it once, because every time you flip it out, it knocks the juices out and that. This is a totally different animal. You can flip it back and forth and and just gingerly brown it and get it just right. So don't worry about that. The key thing about cooking fish is you want high heat, you want it seared in the oils, and you want to keep the tender, which will keep the center nice and juicy. Now this pan now, because it's cast iron, we've got it on high heat. It's got a lot of heat going on. So we just keep, sorry, I should turn it that way, and you take a look at it, it's still got a ways to go. Once we get the color set, then we can lower the temperature on the pan and do the actual baking of the fish. Even though it's a pan, now it gets into a baking kind of mode where you've got to get it just to the right level of doneness. We'll be back in a second with it. Okay, so we're getting pretty close now. You can see, oh, we lost a little leg there, but that's okay. Still going to be fine. Now, see, this has a little less browning. So now we do the opposite thing. This is going to go in the center of the pan. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this fork. Well, see the leg that came off? We can see that if we go into the thicker part of the fish, we can see that it's pretty well cooked. There is no more uncooked flesh in the center, which this is key. Now it's still going to keep cooking as it sits in the pan, so we want to get it out of there right away. Because there's residual heat that will be in the salmon itself, and this will keep cooking it. You'll end up with an overcooked, dry salmon. Okay. Now, the next step is you never ever want to cook high heat with butter as well. It just burns, it goes nasty, and it's not good, and it's not good for you. Butter is good, everything is in moderation. So what we've done is we have a glass that I put a little dollop of butter that's inside. It's not overheated, it still has to stay nice and creamy. And you want to pour that on over after. You do not want to cook in butter. Unless you're cooking something like a small fish like perch on low heat, where the butter is just warming the fish as it cooks, and it's not a high heat related situation, then that's fine. So now we have the butter on. That's going to give a nice fresh taste, salted butter. It's fine for you. Then we're going to take our mango, our fresh mango, and we're going to put it on the top and just spread it over it like that. So that's one medium-sized ripe mango will do your job and fit the bill. And now we'll go and get our squash. You have to do this one at a time here. They're quite hot in temperature, but we have our squash here. Then what happens is we can check out our fish here and how it's cooked. Take a little mango with it, and you can see on the inside it's just cooked. You don't want it overcooked, especially salmon. I think that's going to work. Squash, like I said, I'm a little picker. I take from the side, a little bit from the middle, get those seasonings and spices. It is cooled down by now because we got ahead of the game. You can still cook it earlier if you don't want to be pressured. Cook the squash a little bit earlier before you even do the stuff. At the last minute, give it another shot of a minute, 2 minutes. It's not going to hurt it. Rewarms it again, and away you go. And it doesn't hurt your guests when it comes time to serve to the table. That's our show for today. Cheers.